The streets of New Orleans were nearly deserted that night, swallowed by a rainstorm so fierce it seemed the sky itself had cracked open. Streetlights flickered like dying fireflies, their reflections shimmering in puddles that filled every crack in the weathered asphalt. Thunder rolled low and long over the French Quarter, rattling the iron balconies and setting the old city on edge. Inside a sleek black town car, Ethan Cross stared out the window, his thoughts lost somewhere far beyond the blurred cityscape. The rhythmic sound of raindrops pelting the glass was almost hypnotic. His jaw tightened with the remnants of another day spent fighting battles behind glossy boardroom doors, merger talks, legal wranglings, the constant exhausting charade of success. Ethan had built his empire brick by brutal brick. Cross Enterprises was a name known throughout the South, but tonight none of it mattered. Money didn't shield you from loneliness. Power didn't warm your bed when sleep wouldn't come. The driver, a stoic man named Warren, slowed the car as they turned onto Chartres Street. Up ahead, barely visible through the sheets of rain, a small figure appeared, someone waving frantically, standing directly in the path of the oncoming car. Warren cursed under his breath and hit the brakes, tires skidding slightly on the slick street. What the hell? Ethan leaned forward, peering into the storm. It was a woman. She was soaked through, shivering, clutching a tiny child to her chest. Her hair clung to her face, and her wide brown eyes locked onto the vehicle like a lifeline. Warren lowered the window slightly. "Ma'am, you need to get off the road. It's not safe out here." "Please," the woman gasped, her voice raw from the cold. "Just a few blocks. My daughter, she's freezing and we have nowhere to go." For a moment, silence filled the car. Warren shifted uneasily, glancing at Ethan in the rearview mirror, waiting for a command. Ethan's first instinct was to refuse. You couldn't be too careful these days, not even in a city as soulful as New Orleans. But something about her stopped him. Maybe it was the way she curled protectively around her daughter, as if she could shield the little girl from the world's cruelty with sheer will. Maybe it was the desperate dignity in her trembling voice. Without speaking, Ethan reached for the door handle and pushed it open. "Get in," he said simply. The woman hesitated for a fraction of a second, then bundled the child tighter against her and climbed into the back seat, settling cautiously beside Ethan. Water dripped from her clothes, pooling onto the leather seats. But Ethan didn't care. Warren shot him a look, a raised eyebrow of disbelief, before pulling away from the curb and guiding the car through the downpour. Inside the warmth of the car, the little girl, no older than 5, whimpered, softly bearing her face into the woman's chest. "Shh, baby," she whispered, rocking her gently. "It's okay. We're safe now." Ethan studied them quietly. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sophia," she replied, her voice shaking. "And this is Lily." Sophia. Lily. Names that felt too fragile for a night like this. "I'm Ethan," he said, offering his hand. She hesitated before taking it, her fingers ice cold and trembling against his palm. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Anywhere safe," she said, her eyes glistening. We just need to get out of the rain." Ethan nodded slowly. His mind raced through possibilities. Hotels, shelters. None of it sat right with him. There was a tightness in his chest he hadn't felt in years, an ache he couldn't explain. "Take us home, Warren," Ethan said quietly. Warren glanced back at him in the mirror but said nothing. He turned the car toward the outskirts of the city, where Ethan's secluded estate waited, a sprawling property shaded by ancient oak trees dripping with Spanish moss. Sophia stared out the window, her arms wrapped tightly around Lily, who had already begun to drift into an exhausted sleep. Tension radiated from her in waves. It was clear she didn't trust the situation, didn't trust him. Why should she? The world had taught her that kindness usually came with a price, but Ethan wasn't thinking about transactions or consequences. He was thinking about a woman, too brave to let fear paralyze her, and a child too young to know how much she'd already survived. As they pulled up to the gated drive, Sophia's mouth fell open slightly. Even through the rain and darkness, the house loomed magnificent, a mansion in the Greek Revival style, with towering white columns and warm golden lights spilling from the windows. Warren stopped near the guest house, a cozy structure separate from the main residence. Ethan opened the door and stepped out, immediately sheltering Sophia and Lily under a large black umbrella. "This way," he said, leading them up the stone path. Inside, the guest house was simple but welcoming. Hardwood floors, soft beige furniture, a stocked kitchen, and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. Sophia hovered near the doorway, soaking wet, unsure if she was really welcome. You can stay here, Ethan said. There's food, dry clothes in the closet. Take whatever you need. Sophia's lip quivered, but she swallowed the emotion. Thank you, she whispered. Ethan gave a small nod. Get some rest. We'll talk more in the morning. He turned to leave, but paused when Lily, half asleep in her mother's arms, reached out and touched his coat. Thank you, mister, she murmured. Ethan felt something inside him crack wide open. You're welcome, sweetheart, he said softly. He stepped back into the rain, pulling the door closed behind him. For a long time he stood outside, the storm drenching him, his heart pounding with a feeling he couldn't name. Maybe, just maybe, this storm had brought something he hadn't realized he needed. The rain had softened into a steady drizzle by morning, blanketing the estate in a silver mist. Sunlight fought to break through the clouds, casting a muted glow over the manicured gardens and the grand old oaks that stood like sentinels around the property. Ethan stood at his kitchen window sipping black coffee, his gaze fixed on the small guest house in the distance. He hadn't slept much. Too many thoughts, too many questions. He knew he had taken a risk last night, bringing a stranger and her child into his home. But somehow, in a way he couldn't explain, it hadn't felt like a risk at all. It had felt necessary. He set down his mug, grabbed a spare hoodie from the coat rack, and made his way across the wet lawn. When he knocked gently, there was a pause before the door opened a crack. Sophia peeked out, her face wary but composed. Good morning, Ethan said, keeping his voice low, non-threatening. Sophia stepped back, allowing him to enter. The guest house smelled faintly of lavender. Someone had found the linen spray stocked in the bathroom. Lily sat curled on the couch. Under a thick quilt, clutching a stuffed animal, Ethan didn't remember being there last night. Maybe Sophia had carried it in her bag, a small comfort in a world that had given her so few. You both sleep okay? Ethan asked. Sophia nodded, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Better than we have in a long time, she admitted softly. Ethan noticed the small pile of wet clothes neatly folded by the fireplace, now dry. Sophia had managed to make the guest house feel lived in overnight, a testament to resilience he found humbling. I thought you might want some breakfast, he offered, holding up a brown paper bag. There's a great little bakery in town. Beignets, croissants, some juice. Sophia's eyes widened slightly. A flash of longing she quickly masked with polite gratitude. That's very kind of you. As they unpacked the bag, Lily's face lit up at the sight of powdered sugar-dusted pastries. She wriggled out from under the blanket and made a beeline for the table. Sit, please, Sophia coaxed, pulling out a chair for her daughter. Ethan watched quietly as mother and daughter moved through the small, instinctive routines of survival, checking for spills, cutting pastries into small bites, wiping tiny fingers. There was a fierce tenderness to it that squeezed something deep inside him. You're welcome to stay as long as you need, Ethan said, surprising even himself with the words. Sophia hesitated, her shoulders stiffening slightly. I don't want to be a burden, she said, her voice carefully neutral. You're not, Ethan, replied simply. And besides, the house could use a little more life. Sophia studied him for a long moment, as if trying to find the catch, the hidden cost. When she found none, something in her posture relaxed, just a fraction, but enough. After breakfast, Ethan gave them a small tour of the estate. The guest house had its own fenced-in garden, an old swing set half swallowed by wisteria, and a narrow path leading down to a small private lake. Lily's eyes grew round with wonder at the sight of the ducks paddling across the misty water. Mommy, look, she squealed, tugging at Sophia's hand. Sophia knelt beside her, smiling for the first time. A real smile, unguarded and bright. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. Later that afternoon, while Lily napped, Sophia wandered into the main house. She moved hesitantly, unsure of where she was allowed to be. The place was beautiful, but carried a heavy, almost reverent silence, like a museum no one visited anymore. She found the kitchen by accident, a vast space with gleaming marble countertops, dark oak cabinets, and an industrial-grade coffee machine that looked like it belonged in a science lab. Ethan entered a moment later, catching her mid-stare. That thing's more temperamental than it looks, he said with a chuckle. Even I can't get it to work half the time. Sophia smiled sheepishly. I used to be a barista, she said almost apologetically. Back when, before everything. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Really? Think you could teach it some manners? Sophia shrugged, stepping closer to the machine. Her fingers danced over the controls with a confidence Ethan hadn't seen before. She adjusted settings, checked water levels, and within minutes the machine sputtered obediently to life. He laughed, a deep, genuine sound that startled them both. "Consider me impressed." Sophia handed him a steaming mug, and for a brief moment, their hands brushed. It was the barest touch, but it sent a jolt through Ethan, a feeling he hadn't allowed himself in what felt like forever. That evening, Sophia sat by the window of the guest house, watching the rain ease into a soft mist. Lily lay asleep beside her, cradling the stuffed animal she refused to let go. On the small table beside them was a sheet of paper Lily had drawn on earlier, a crayon sketch of a man, a woman, and a child standing under a giant rainbow. The figures were simple but unmistakable. Lily had drawn Ethan too. Sophia traced the drawing with her fingertip, her throat tightening. Maybe not everyone who offered help wanted something in return. Maybe, just maybe, there were still good people in the world, people who didn't see her as broken or burdensome, but simply human. And for the first time in a long time, Sophia allowed herself a sliver of hope. The days that followed settled into an unexpected, delicate rhythm. Morning mist would cling to the trees. The kitchen would fill with the scent of fresh coffee, courtesy of Sophia's newfound dominion over the unruly machine, and laughter would occasionally float across the grounds like the faint chime of distant bells. It had been years since Ethan had heard laughter inside these walls. He often found himself lingering outside the guest house, pretending to be on a call or surveying the grounds just to hear Lily giggling over a silly story Sophia made up, or to catch the sound of Sophia humming while hanging laundry in the backyard. He told himself it was curiosity, responsibility, even, but deep down he knew it was something else. Longing. One afternoon, after a particularly heavy conference call, Ethan escaped the suffocating confines of his home office. The tension clung to him like a second skin. Drawn by instinct more than thought, he wandered toward the lake where he spotted Sophia and Lily. Sophia sat cross-legged on a plaid blanket, carefully weaving colored feathers, beads, and string into small hoops. Lily sat beside her, her small hands mimicking the motions clumsily but determinedly. Ethan approached, and Lily's face lit up. "Mr. Ethan, we're making dream catchers," she called out proudly. Sophia smiled up at him, her hands never pausing in their careful weaving. "They're supposed to catch bad dreams so they can't reach you," she explained. Ethan lowered himself onto the grass beside them, feeling slightly out of place but oddly welcome. "You believe they work?" he asked, half teasing. Sophia shrugged, her fingers threading a bead onto the hoop. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "and sometimes believing in something good is enough." Ethan fell silent, watching the way the breeze lifted strands of her hair, the quiet determination in her hands, the safety Lily clearly felt tucked against her side, believing in something good. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself even that much. Later that night, restless and sleepless, Ethan wandered through the halls of his home, in the grand study where he kept relics of his past, trophies, certificates, photographs. He caught sight of a small wooden box tucked behind some dusty books. He pulled it out. Inside, nestled in velvet, was a tarnished silver keychain, a tiny sculpted violin. Ethan closed his eyes against the sudden rush of memory. His little sister Anna had loved music. She dreamed of playing the violin on the grand stages of the world. Ethan, obsessed with work even at a young age, had missed so many recitals, had brushed her off when she asked for his help or his presence. And then one rainy night, she was gone. A car crash on her way home from a competition he'd promised to attend but cancelled at the last minute. Guilt was a cage he hadn't escaped since. He shoved the box back onto the shelf and left the room, the silence pressing against him harder than ever. The next morning, the crack in his armor widened. It started simply. Sophia had let Lily play quietly in the hallway outside the guest house while she folded laundry. Ethan came across the little girl sitting cross-legged on the cool marble floor, humming to herself as she arranged small stones into patterns. He knelt down beside her. "What are you making?" he asked. "A magic road," Lily said seriously. "It helps people find their way home." Ethan smiled, but his chest tightened painfully. If only it were that simple. Sophia appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a towel. "Sorry," she said, slightly breathless. "I hope she's not in your way." "Not at all," Ethan said quickly. He stood, dusting off his hands. Their eyes met, an unspoken understanding passing between them. Two people carrying too many shadows. Later, that evening, a sudden commotion shattered the fragile peace. A sharp crash echoed from the study. Ethan rushed in to find Lily standing frozen beside the overturned wooden box. The violin keychain lay at her feet, snapped cleanly in two. Sophia was right behind him. She scooped Lily into her arms, shielding her instinctively. "I'm so sorry," Sophia stammered, her voice thick with panic. She didn't mean to. But Ethan wasn't listening. The broken violin seemed to mock him, a brutal reminder of everything he'd lost and failed to protect. The walls seemed to close in, the air thick with grief he couldn't contain. "Get out," he said, the words escaping harsher than he intended. Sophia's eyes widened, wounded. She gathered Lily and fled the room without a word. Ethan stood alone amidst the ruins of memory, his fists clenched, his heart breaking in ways he didn't have names for. That night, rain returned. Not a furious storm this time, but a quiet, persistent drizzle. Ethan sat on the edge of his bed, the broken keychain in his palm. Regret gnawed at him. Shame twisted in his gut. He had built walls to survive. But in doing so, he had hurt the very people he most wanted to protect. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to tear them down. Morning broke with a heavy, humid stillness hanging over the estate. The rain had finally stopped, but the world outside Ethan's windows looked muted and uncertain, as if it too were holding its breath. Ethan sat in his study, staring at the broken violin keychain laid out carefully on the desk. He hadn't slept. Guilt gnawed at the edges of his mind. He had promised himself he wouldn't be like this, cold, reactive, alone. Yet here he was, pushing away the only warmth he'd known in years. He rubbed a hand across his face, stood and made his way to the guest house, carrying a small box in his hand. Sophia answered the door, her eyes puffy but resolute. She straightened her shoulders, standing between Ethan and the soft shuffle of Lily playing behind her. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, the words rough in his throat. I overreacted. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't yours either." Sophia hesitated, searching his face for sincerity. Then slowly she stepped aside. He handed her the box. Inside was a new violin keychain, simple but lovingly crafted. "It's not the same," he admitted. "But maybe it's time to stop holding on to things that only remind us of what we've lost." Sophia's fingers brushed his as she took the box, and for the first time Ethan saw something shift in her gaze, a softening, a silent forgiveness he didn't think he deserved. "You don't have to be perfect to be kind," she said simply. It struck him harder than any boardroom battle ever had. That fragile peace lasted barely a day. The first sign came as a crackle on the intercom, Warren's voice tight with urgency. "Sir, there's someone at the gate asking for Miss Sophia." Ethan's stomach clenched. He hurried to the security monitor. A man stood outside, wiry, jittery, with a hard, dangerous gleam in his eyes. His clothes were dirty, his fists clenched and white. Sophia peered behind Ethan, drawn by the tension. One glance at the screen and her face drained of color. "No," she whispered. "Who is he?" Ethan asked, though part of him already knew. "My ex-husband," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "Eric." Warren spoke again over the intercom. "He's demanding to see her. Says he won't leave without what he's owed." Ethan's jaw tightened. He turned to Sophia. "You don't have to face him," he said firmly. "Not alone." But Sophia shook her head. "I need to end this. If I don't, he'll never stop." Against his better judgment, Ethan watched from a distance as Sophia approached the gate. Eric leaned close, sneering through the bars. "You think you can hide from me, Soph?" he spat. "That kid, she's mine too. You owe me. You always have." Sophia stood tall, though Ethan could see her knees shaking. "You have no claim over us," she said, her voice clear. Eric's face twisted. "Then you better find a way to pay up, sweetheart, or I'll take what's mine." The threat hung in the air like poison. Sophia backed away, retreating toward the house. Ethan was there in an instant, shielding her with his body as Warren activated the lockdown system. The gates closed, but the damage was done. Sophia collapsed onto the steps, burying her face in her hands. Ethan knelt beside her, his heart breaking at the sight. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "I shouldn't have stayed. I put you in danger." Ethan cupped her face gently, forcing her to look at him. "You and Lily belong here," he said fiercely. "No one is taking you from me. No one." But that night, fear won. While Ethan worked late, reviewing security footage and calling in favors to tighten protection around the estate, Sophia made a decision. She packed a small bag for herself and Lily. She wrote a letter, short, hurried, and heartbreaking, and tucked it under Ethan's office door. Then with the softest click of the guest house door, she disappeared into the night. The next morning, Ethan found the letter. He read it once, twice, 3 times, his hands shaking harder with each word. Ethan, thank you for giving us peace, even if just for a little while. Thank you for treating me like I mattered when so few ever have. But I can't. Let my past destroy the only safe place Lily and I have ever known. Please don't come after us. Please remember us happy. Sophia. The paper slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the floor. A raw, guttural sound escaped him, a sound of loss, of fury, of helplessness. He had built walls to keep pain out. Now the pain was all that was left. Later that day, Warren found him pacing the library, seething. Sir, Warren said carefully, there's something you should know. Before she left, I saw her giving Lily a dream catcher she made. Ethan stilled. She told Lily, Warren continued, that even if they were far away, the dream catcher would make sure someone could always find them. Ethan looked up sharply. He wasn't going to honor Sophia's wish to let her go, because love wasn't letting someone slip into darkness. Love was fighting like hell to bring them back. He grabbed his keys, his coat, and his resolve and stormed out into the storm's fading light. He would find her, no matter what it took, because she wasn't just a guest anymore. She was home. The streets of New Orleans blurred past as Ethan sped through the city, a man possessed. Every contact, every favor owed, every connection. He pulled on them all. Surveillance cameras, bus stations, gas station clerks, motel managers. Piece by painful piece, he stitched together a trail, a withdrawal from a small ATM in Baton Rouge. A diner waitress in Lafayette remembered a tired woman with a little girl who colored pictures on a napkin. A ticket purchased under a false name headed east. She was running from danger, from fear, from the impossible dream of safety she didn't dare trust. But Ethan wasn't just chasing her. He was chasing something bigger, the hope that he hadn't already lost the family he never even knew he needed. By the 3rd day, exhaustion gnawed at him. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands raw from gripping the steering wheel too tightly. Still, he pressed on, a gas station attendant. Outside Savannah, Georgia finally gave him the lead he needed. Yeah, the man said, scratching his chin. Real pretty lady, real tired looking. Had a little girl with her. They asked if there were any places nearby that would let them stay cheap, no questions asked. The attendant pointed down the road. Olo. Train yard. There's some abandoned warehouses. Folks squat there sometimes. Not safe, if you ask me. Ethan didn't hesitate. He found the place just as night began to fall, a skeletal, crumbling relic of a forgotten time. Rusted metal beams loomed against the twilight like broken bones. Piles of debris littered the ground, and in the farthest, most shadowed corner, he saw it, the faint flicker of a makeshift fire through a shattered window. His heart thundered as he crossed the cracked pavement. Through the grime and glass, he saw her. Sophia, wrapped in a threadbare blanket, sat close to the tiny heater. Lily, curled against her side, clutching the dream catcher like a lifeline. Ethan stepped into the building, his voice hoarse. Sophia. She turned, and then for a heartbeat the world held its breath. Her face paled. She scrambled to her feet, placing herself instinctively between him and Lily. You shouldn't have come, she said, her voice cracking. You shouldn't be here either, Ethan said, his tone gentler than he'd meant it to be. Sophia shook her head, tears brimming in her eyes. I had to keep you safe. And you think leaving me was safer? He asked, stepping closer. She swallowed hard, her shoulders trembling. I didn't want to drag you into my mess. I thought it was better this way. Ethan laughed, a broken, painful sound. Better? Sophia, I have more resources than you can imagine. I can fight this. I wanted to fight this for you, for Lily. She opened her mouth, but no words came. You didn't save me by leaving, Ethan said, his voice rough. You shattered me. A sudden crack of thunder split the night. Sophia flinched, and instinctively Ethan stepped forward. Stop running, he said, his hands trembling. Let me help. She shook her head weakly. I don't know how. Then let me show you. Before she could pull away, the heavens opened up again, a heavy, relentless rain drumming against the broken rooftop. Sophia grabbed Lily, bundling the girl closer, shielding her from the sudden downpour. Without thinking, Ethan shrugged off his coat and threw it over both of them, sheltering them in the only way he could. Sophia looked up at him, rain dripping down her cheeks, mingling with her tears. "You can't fix this," she whispered. "Maybe not," Ethan admitted, "but I can stand beside you while you heal." The wind howled through the ruins. Somewhere, a metal beam groaned under the strain. The place was falling apart, just like Sophia's defenses. Finally, something inside her broke. She crumpled against him, sobbing, clutching Lily between them. Ethan wrapped them both in his arms, his body a fortress against the storm. "You're not alone anymore," he murmured against her hair. "And you never will be again." For the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to believe it. The rain forced them to move quickly. Ethan carried Lily, fast asleep, against his shoulder, while Sophia clutched the few belongings she could salvage. Together, they made their way back to his car, headlights cutting through the curtain of rain like a promise. As they drove away from the ruin and wreckage of what Sophia had tried to survive, Ethan reached over and found her hand. She let him. She squeezed back, and somewhere between the brokenness and the beginning, a new chapter quietly unfurled. One neither of them dared hope for, but both knew deep down, was finally, irrevocably theirs. 2 weeks later, under the vast open skies of Texas Hill Country, Sophia sat on the wraparound porch of Ethan's family home, the very place she once thought she would only glimpse through the glass of someone else's world. But this time, she wasn't an outsider. This time, she belonged. The morning sun bathed the fields of lavender in a soft purple glow. Bees drifted lazily among the blooms, and the sweet scent of new beginnings floated in the breeze. Inside, Ethan was on the phone with his legal team, finalizing the case that would end Sophia's nightmare for good. The evidence they had collected, the threats recorded at the gate, Eric's history of domestic violence, and testimony from witnesses was overwhelming. Within days of Ethan's relentless pursuit of justice, Sophia's ex-husband was arrested without resistance. No more hiding, no more running, freedom. When it finally came, wasn't loud. It was the gentle exhale Sophia released one morning, realizing she wasn't afraid anymore. That afternoon, Ethan found her sitting by the lake, Lily skipping stones across the water's glassy surface. He dropped, down beside Sophia, close enough that their shoulders brushed. "You're quiet," he said softly. "I'm thinking," she replied, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "About how everything changed, because of one ride." Ethan chuckled, low and warm. "Best wrong turn I ever made." Sophia laughed, and the sound was like sunlight breaking through clouds. They sat in easy silence, watching Lily chase butterflies near the wildflowers. Then Ethan shifted, pulling something from the pocket of his jacket. Sophia froze as he opened the small velvet box. Inside sat a simple gold ring, inlaid with a thin thread of tiny diamonds. Delicate, timeless, beautiful, just like her. Hands flew to her mouth, tears instantly springing to her eyes. "I don't have all the right words," Ethan said, voice unsteady. "I don't have grand promises or perfect plans. But I have this, a heart that's yours, a home that's ours, and a life I want to build with you, brick by messy, imperfect brick." He got down on one knee in the soft grass, holding up the ring. "Sophia Grace," he whispered, "will you marry me?" Sophia let out a soft, broken laugh, the kind that only comes from years of wanting something so badly you'd almost given up on it. "I was never looking for a prince," she said through her tears. "I just wanted someone who wouldn't leave." "You found him," Ethan said simply. With hands that trembled with joy, she nodded, then threw her arms around him. "Yes," she whispered, into his ear. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." From across the field, Lily shouted, "Did Mommy say yes?" Sophia pulled back, laughing through her tears, and called out, "I said yes." Lily pumped her fists in the air and twirled, sending dandelion seeds scattering into the wind. The wedding was held 2 months later in the garden overlooking the lake. It wasn't grand. It wasn't extravagant. It was perfect. Sophia wore a simple dress she had sewn herself, ivory linen, embroidered with tiny vines and flowers. Lily, in a cotton sundress, skipped barefoot down the aisle, scattering lavender petals in her wake. Only a handful of guests gathered. Warren, some of Ethan's closest friends, and a few neighbors who had become like family. As Sophia walked toward Ethan, barefoot in the grass, the late afternoon sun bathed everything in golden light, and even the air seemed to hold its breath. Their vows weren't rehearsed. They were real. "I promise to be yours," Shelter when the world is cruel, Sophia said, her voice steady. To celebrate your victories, to sit with you in your storms, and to never let go, no matter how rough the road. I promise, Ethan said, his voice breaking, to fight for us every day, to build not just a home, but a life full of ordinary magic. To love you not because you're perfect, but because you're mine. Lily stood between them, beaming with pride, holding a handmade sign that read, Family, built by love. As the sun dipped behind the hills, they danced their first dance on the lawn under strings of twinkling lights. Sophia's head rested against Ethan's chest, his arms strong and sure around her. Lily twirled nearby with a group of laughing guests, the dream catcher she had made hanging proudly from a tree branch, spinning gently in the breeze. In that moment, everything was exactly as it should be, safe, whole, home. Later, after the cake had been eaten and the guests had drifted away, Ethan, Sophia and Lily sat by the lakeshore, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the stars appear one by one. Sophia leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder. Do you ever wonder, she asked softly, what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night? Ethan smiled into her hair. I don't, he said, because whatever road it took, whatever storm it needed, it led me to you. The future stretched out before them, vast and unknown, just like the southern sky overhead. But for the first time in a long time, none of them were afraid, because now when the storms came, and they surely would, they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart, home at last. Sometimes the greatest transformations begin with a single act of kindness. Sophia and Ethan's journey reminds us that healing isn't born from perfection, but from the courage to trust again, to build again, even when the past has shattered us. Their story proves that family is not defined by blood, but by love fiercely, chosen. No matter how fierce the storms we face, there is always hope. And sometimes what feels like an ending is just the beginning of the most beautiful chapter. In the end, it's not about being saved. It's about saving each other. If this story touched your heart, reminded you of the power of compassion, and made you believe again in second chances, please consider subscribing to Fortune's Wrath. We bring you real, emotional, and inspiring tales that remind us all. No matter how dark the night, love always finds a way. Thank you for watching, and remember, some stories do not end.